Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is The Mothman Prophecies, directed by Mark Pellington from 2002. This is the imprint edition, number 39. This is a wonderful little film from 2002. I always thought it was from the 90s, but it's 2002 after Pellington made Arlington Road, which is also a wonderful little underrated film with Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins about domestic terrorists. Pellington started in MTV before he started to make films, and he's kind of went on and made kind of small town America dramas, but never really became a major player. So this stars Richard Gere and Linney, who both worked together in Primal Fear. Will Patton's also in it, Deborah Messing, and a nice little cameo by Alan Bates, who at this stage in his career, his hair was a lot darker than his eyebrows. But if you're fans of Homicide: Life in the Street, there's a couple of actors that you may recognise who didn't play cops in Homicide: Life in the Street, but they are in a couple of the best episodes. Right, that's saying a lot of Homicide: Life in the Street because there's lots of really good episodes, but if you're a fan of the show, you'll probably recognise a couple of familiar faces, a man and a woman. That's as much as I'll give away. This is based on a book, and it's kind of the myth of, apparently there've been sightings all around the world of this Mothman that perhaps prophesies disasters. You know, there's reports of being seen around Chernobyl before the Chernobyl disaster, but this focuses on the true events in West Virginia, where the Mothman was sighted before something bad happened. So the film opens with Richard Gere, a very successful writer in the Washington Post, and he and his wife Deborah Messing just buy this big dream house, and they're on their way home and they get into a car accident. Deborah Messing perhaps saw something which distracted her, and she ends up in the hospital. Cut to 2 years later, and Richard Gere is in a bit of a different position. He still works for the Post, but he's not as successful. His life has changed in a major way, and one night he ends up driving, and he ends up in the middle of nowhere, goes to this house, and the door's opened by Will Patton. Gere's car's broken down, so he wants to use the telephone, but Will Patton says the past 2 nights he's come to his door, so he threatens him with a shotgun and corners him in their bathroom before Laura Linney, who's the local law enforcement, turns up to defuse the situation, and Richard Gere ends up staying in town. Obviously he knows he wasn't there the past 2 nights, but he does kind of come to the realisation that he doesn't quite remember how he got to this small town, because he drove from Washington, but this small town is in the state border of Virginia, and Ohio, so he's pretty much driven across state, and he doesn't really have much recollection of how or why he's kind of got there. And then he gets embroiled in this investigation of these reports, and Will Patton is one of the there's a few people in the town where strange things have been happening. They're hearing strange noises, and there's sightings of something with red eyes. Again, this sounds like a creature feature, but Pellington, when he first read the script, that had the creature stuff dialed back in subsequent drafts. The creature makes more of an appearance, but Pellington thought that was too hokey. So it's not really a creature feature. Pellington didn't want a creature feature. Richard Gere didn't want a creature feature. So there's just a couple of flashes, really effective flashes. Again, it's a film that would be completely different today. There'd be more of the creature, but I think it works with the odd atmosphere, the way Pellington shoots the film. There's lots of close-ups, but using long lenses. He does that Michael Mann thing of making some of the frame out of focus, and things that you'd expect to be in focus aren't necessarily in focus. He uses really good sound design, because at one point the voice of the creature is heard. He uses infrared film at times, lots of atmosphere, out of focus stuff, and it just has this feeling of dread. It's a film that's a slow burn, so again, by today's standards, it would be a lot quicker getting to the plot points, but it really builds a wonderful sense of atmosphere and dread as this small town, strange things are happening and strange phenomenon, as Richard Gere gets more and more obsessed with trying to find out not only what happened to his wife, but what happened to the people in this town, including Will Patton. He seeks Alan Bates, who's a writer who has written about this, but again, he was obsessed to the point where his wife left him, his children disowned him, he ended up in a mental facility for 4 years. And again, it's this myth of these creatures that prophesize disasters, and again, it's about, disasters happen, can we stop them, can we control them? As Alan Bates says, even when he knew these things were going to happen, nobody would believe him, because strangely enough, people don't tend to believe people who believe in prophecies, until it gets to the climax of the film, where certain information that has been prophesized comes together, which leads to an event which apparently happened in this West Virginia town. Now, as we all know, imprint releases are fairly expensive, but this is one. Not only is the film really good, a really superior kind of genre film, but this edition is one of those imprints that's absolutely stacked. So we get a commentary with Mark Pellington. We get 99 Will Die directing the Mothman Prophecies, which is an extended interview with Mark Pellington from 2020. We have an interview with the editor from 2020, an interview with the composer from 2020, an interview with the production designer from 2020, a making of featurette, a half light music video, deleted scenes, And there's the really interesting Search for the Mothman documentary, which is, I'm assuming, from American television, which goes into the real life events that inspired the non-fiction book and therefore the film. The real life events in West Virginia, speaking with eyewitnesses who saw the Mothman, which is a fun little documentary. But the real treat in this edition is there's a day by day, a director's journey, parts 1 and 2, which is about the making of the film and the behind the scenes. Because this was kind of, it's a studio film, but it was a kind of smaller studio film, so there wasn't much kind of interference like we always hear about in production, so they're pretty much allowed to do what they kind of wanted. So it's a really wonderful documentary about the decisions that were made and how they actually did stuff. So it's from location scouting and the visual effects and the sound design and the score. So it's a really in-depth and kind of fascinating documentary. And again, it's a film that from 2002, it's 20 years old now. I think it stands up really well because it's about your imagination. There's not a lot of things that are kind of spelled out. I mean, there's a line or two near the end of the film that I would have preferred weren't in it. But a character says to the Richard Gere character, "Oh, when's your flight to Chicago?" And then it cuts to the next scene, and he's obviously in Chicago, but there's no Chicago that comes up, which is kind of, it's always refreshing when you actually see films that don't do that. That show you a shot of the Eiffel Tower, then come up with Paris, just in case you didn't know. It is a film that you're supposed to pay attention. I know that's crazy, but you're actually supposed to pay attention because the Mothman, there's only a couple of flashes. You can easily miss it if you're not actually paying attention. So if you're looking at your phone or like chatting to somebody while you're watching it, you could actually miss it. And again, it's about sound design, so the score itself is very much in the background, so there's no obvious score points for, oh, here comes a scary bit, or here comes a... So it's very... So even though it's made in 2002, it's almost a kind of old-fashioned film in some regards. I like how the Gere character and the Laura Linney character, there's no sex scene thrown in like a day after they meet or anything like that. They obviously like each other, and perhaps you could see in the future them having a relationship, but it's not like crowbarred in because they've got bigger concerns than that. So that's kind of organic, and the characters are really kind of well written. Gere, who I'm not the biggest fan of, is really good in this. Everybody is. Will Patton as kind of the way into the story, as far as he's hearing voices and has seen things, and he meets the Mothman at one point. He is on that line of fragile or fragility from a mental standpoint, and he really has that and shows that in the eyes very well. It's just a well crafted, well shot. A lot of it is people talking, but again, Pellington uses really interesting setups and sound design and use of lighting. So it's always interesting, and again, the mystery is built so you are kind of hooked in and you kind of want to know exactly what's going on. Not everything is explained, which is wonderful. Um, yeah, and it's just really well made. It's 20 years old now, but I think it does actually stand up very well. I remember watching it years ago, but I couldn't actually remember how it ended. Um, and again, this is a really good release by Imprint because there's a lot of really good extras on it. So that's the Mothman Prophecies, which I would recommend if you're into superior kind of genre films. So thanks very much for watching this random review. Please let me know if you've seen the Mothman Prophecies and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more videos. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.